What's up, world? This is Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. I want to welcome everybody back to Family Talk with my pops, Wayne Carter. Pops, I've said it before, but I can't overstate how much I appreciate your time in this, and I think it's more valuable than you know, and maybe more valuable than I know. So I really do appreciate you taking your time to do this with me.
It's more fun for me.
Well, that's cool too. So that's always cool. I'm glad we get to share it then, and that's what's up as well. I was reviewing last week's conversation or where we left off in your biographical narrative. I like the way that sounds, so I'm gonna keep on using that. I think, uh, but I had a little bit more. I had some more questions about your National Guard post and the maintenance unit that was in Nashville, which is still around. That unit is still around, but it's moved some locations. Didn't y'all used to be over by when you were there? Where you were by what is now like the airport, and were y'all in that area? No, where were y'all at?
That was out on Sidco Drive.
Okay,
That's where the state headquarters used to be. I don't know if it's still there or not, but that was that whole area. But that was the Hundred Oaks area and all that.
okay. Well, you mentioned that it was a good experience because it was very much like just a regular job in that it was really shift work almost, and you were the weekend shift. And is that correct?
Yeah, yeah,
And so was that National Guard unit attached to a regular Army unit that was regular time? Is that what's going on? And what
yeah.
is
And I,
that?
I think I think most guard and reserve units are attached. I know that ours was. It was a 777 maintenance company, which was part of the maintenance battalion. Was out the battalion headquarters is actually in Murfreesboro. But we were attached to Central Europe, and I'm thinking of probably even Seventh Corps back then. I don't remember, but because we were a lower unit, but we went to Europe a couple of times as the at the maintenance company.
Yeah, and I want to get in. I know we'll get into that as we come up onto it, but I just kind of wanted to clarify that. And then I had some other questions. Did that unit have anything to do, or do you know anything about the movements that occurred, the World War II training that they kind of refer to as the movements around? I live in Lebanon, Tennessee. I guess that might be a localized term, but it even has some relation with the university here, Cumberland University, and some other kind of historical aspects that go unmentioned a little bit. Do you know anything about that? And if you do, can you enlighten me?
Well, not a whole lot, but I know that they it was associated with, as you say, those movements not only in on around the Cedar Forest area, but also in the Tullahoma area, and essentially and eventually got deployed to Europe during World War II.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that interesting. It's not something we really hear a lot about throughout our education in like Tennessee history. I'm thinking about public education when I say that. And then also, there's like a lot of kind of local lore, at least here in Lebanon. I hear different stories regarding the movements, and I don't know enough about them to retell them. But it's a very interesting historical and cultural aspect of the area.
Well, now, of course, a maintenance unit is not one of these glorious units. Our job was to support the combat effort. But what was happening during the time I was in it is the Army developed what they called forward area support. So we were getting support stuff as far forward as possible, so that if you had to support something, you didn't have to drag the equipment, tank, or whatever back to the battle. We were there, ready to support, and then keeping those supply lines open with parts was a huge deal. We had a huge parts company.
And so a lot of that sounds like to me, and I had a little bit in industry in the but logistics and supply chain, and things of that nature. You're talking about storing parts and getting parts where they need to be,
Yeah.
and kind of the management of all that. Would that be
Yes,
kind of?
that's exactly, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
You probably heard me say this, but rule of thumb is it takes anywhere from 7 to 11 support soldiers to support one combat soldier.
Yeah,
We're talking about
yeah,
getting stuff from the United States to the battle area.
yeah, to the front. And so you mentioned something just a minute ago, and I don't know if we should talk about it now. I know that it'll come up in the future, but you said forward area support, right? That kind of triggered some things in my head just because of, you know, some of my understanding of the military and some of the roles you've had. But what does that mean when you say forward area support?
Well, if you can visualize a traditional battlefield, you have a battle line where the friendly forces are on one side, the enemy forces on the other side, and that battlefield, that battle line is where the fighting pretty much is. Forward support would have that support up there with those units that are fighting.
Yeah, and so what I'm thinking about, and like I said, maybe we'll probably talk about this more, but you would kind of tell, are there's like three general areas of the battlefield. You care to go into that now, or you want to maybe talk about that another time?
But you're right. The main battle area, which is what I just described, and then in our rear we have a rear battle area. Now, forward air support is in the main battle area, not in the rear battle of where of our guys. And then the rear battle of the opposing point we call deep battle. There's deep battle, main battle, rear battle.
And so this is like what you would say front line
Yeah.
support. And when you say it takes 7 soldiers to support one man, one soldier, man or woman, one soldier on the front line.
Yeah, and that's counting it from you know the the movement in the United States all the way to, for this example, Europe. It would take 7 to 11 support soldiers to make sure equipment and supplies got there and maintenance got
Yeah,
there to support that one guy. Yeah.
yeah. That doesn't even have to do with the personnel that it takes to, prep the food and all the other aspects of support. That's just supporting the
That's part of it.
logistics
No,
and
that's
the
part.
supply chain.
No, that's part of it. That's
Okay, okay, okay.
because we're self sufficient. The army is.
Right, yeah, and I'm glad you said that John, because I wanted to talk about that a little bit more, and we mentioned it last time. But how important is that for a platoon or any size unit in the army to be self sufficient?
It's critical, and I think it's one of the areas that the army has, in my view, uh, not done a good job at lately because it's gotten more and more where they contract stuff out. But when I was in the maintenance company and had a platoon, and later on I had a company command, we had our own mess section. I mean, in other words, we had our own cooks, we had our own dining facility. And we may have to go buy local produce, but as far as the people to get it, we didn't have to depend upon contractors. They may or may not have security issues. There are lots of security issues when you're hiring contractors, and then there's some contracts where they will not go forward to support because of the danger.
Hmm.
The other part of that is um, extra duties. For example, what we call KP or kitchen patrol would have been a way of disciplining a soldier where you would not have to court martial. Would not, if you had a problem with a soldier and you wanted to discipline in house, you give him these extra duties as somewhat discipline, and it's just that's just it. And you take away that tool of the commander to be able to do some of the discipline without, you just everything doesn't need to be court martialed.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, and so how long is the initial commitment, just in general, to any reserve component when you swapped over in this program? How long was your initial commitment?
I think it was like 4 years.
Okay. So you done kind of 4 years active duty. Is
Four
that the
years in
prop?
the Air Force, about a year and a half in the Army. So I'd already had about 5.5, 6 years in at that point.
Okay. Is that considered active duty?
Not the Guard, no.
But the 4 years of active duty, and then you transition to the reserve component, and you
Well, for
signed
the
on
Army
for
training, the
right
Army
that
training
year.
time,
That
that was
year.
active duty. Yeah.
Okay. And signed on for another 4 years in the reserve component.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And you said it was one weekend out of the month, so it was really was that ever difficult in getting used to that job you had to do? I mean, you're not doing it a lot. Was there like any rust that you had to knock off that first couple of hours before that first break or whatever?
Well, yeah, and of course, being a second lieutenant at that point, I was kind of the manager of a small group called a platoon, and we had they had jobs to do. We were electronics platoon, so when the guys come in, they had work to do, and so it was stuff they wanted to do. The good part about that unit was we had a lot of people that was in that unit that worked full time for the National Guard in that very role, and so
Yeah.
when the weekenders would come in, they would have work lined up for them to do. So it was an ideal unit to be in as far as a soldier. For me, I wouldn't necessarily doing the work, but I was have to be planning the military operations. You know, if we had a movement, if we had to go out and defend, put out a perimeter, defend ourselves, or all those sort of things was my area of expertise.
Okay, so talk to me about that. So that's really a lot of what it sounds like to me, strategic planning
I wouldn't call it
for,
strategic. It was definitely it was low level planning,
well, yeah, maybe
tactical
not
planning.
strategic planning, but kind of what do you like game planning for these scenarios? Like, what is going on here?
Well, a good part of the year would be the guys going in that was working for us would go in and doing their job, and I would be elsewhere, you know, planning an operation. Once or twice a year, we would take all of our equipment, convoy somewhere, set up out in the field, and set up in a field operation where they're actually having to do the job out in the field. And that was more of my job, was to plan that kind of stuff.
Okay, okay, that's very interesting. So you talked about going to Germany and these field operations, and so you really got to kind of come in. It really sounds kind of like a fun job because you get to look at how the logistics of moving the unit, not necessarily the operations of the unit, but like deploying the unit or
Yeah.
making it field ready, and of course, like just curating that type of programming takes months to it not to set up in advance to kind of, and I know the Army already had it going when you came in, right? Obviously, right?
Yeah.
But that seems like kind of fun, kind of making those phone calls, kind of get those things together. Is that right?
Yeah, a lot of it. Yeah, and you know,
Right.
organize it with other units, so we're not out there by ourselves. You know,
Right.
coordinating with other units.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Well, do you want to tell me more now about maybe some of those experiences, or should we wait until we get a little further on in the years?
Well, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that was, and very fortunate early on in that National Guard career, we got deployed to Europe for 3 weeks for one of the major exercises. They were called reforger exercises, and just that experience of getting that group from Nashville, Tennessee to Central Germany, and I think I mentioned before, but they already had equipment pre-planted there for us, so we didn't have to bring our equipment from the United States, but locating our equipment, getting it field ready, and then setting up shop and doing the job during the exercise. That was interesting. I really enjoyed it, and in that you would from time to time have a few hours off here, a few hours off there, and got an opportunity to go into a community and eat German food. And as you know now, I really like German food as a result of that, and some of the local culture. And I visited. I don't know if it's on this particular one or not, but I visited Roman Catholic cathedrals and museums and stuff in Mannheim, Stuttgart, Kaiserslautern. Those areas was great experience. Great experience.
Yeah, so that is really cool. What was that kind of the first one of these exercises that you were involved in, or did you do any domestic exercises before that, or what was that like?
Yeah, well, the normal 2 week for us would have been to go and support generally an armor unit or something that was in the field like during the 2 week summer. And one year we went to Fort Stewart, Georgia, and I may have mentioned this to you, but when we took a convoy from all our stuff from Nashville, Tennessee to Fort Stewart, Georgia, our vehicles were spread out from Chattanooga to Nashville. It was
Yeah,
a lot of stuff.
yeah. What was the difference in getting ready for the Germany experience compared to the domestic training? What was maybe the biggest? Because you said you had to move the equipment when you're in the States, right? Is that correct? You moved your equipment in this convoy. When you went overseas, they already had that stuff prepped for you. But there's still the thing of getting all your folks over there and
Right.
getting them
Yeah.
housed and getting them fed and all that stuff. Um, what do you think was like the biggest difference to that in that?
This probably sounds minute, but I think the time change was difficult because you pick up or lose 7 or 8 hours going to Central Europe, and you leave here and you're excited and fired up, and all of a sudden you got to get on the ground and go to work, and then all of a sudden fatigue hits, and it takes a day or two to really, but you're operating and doing that. Uh, that was probably, in my memory, the biggest deal.
Yeah. Did a lot of your people kind of deal with that idea of maybe jet lag or something like that?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you deal with that. You kind of you sort of required them to go rest at certain hours just to get into that habit because your body's not ready to go to sleep, but you got to do this, and it takes 2 or 3 days to get your body acclimated, at least for us.
Yeah. Okay, tell me more about these exercises in Germany. And y'all were there supporting what unit, or were y'all supporting there? Was it a tank unit, or do you
Yeah, well, it
recall?
was we were heavy maintenance, so we we
Right.
we maintained tanks and the big equipment, and so part of it we'd had, I don't remember how many, but we had like 4 or 5 teams with, I mean, huge wreckers, and that could tow tanks and trucks of all this equipment on it. They were teams that would go forward out into the close to the battlefield. So there was something going on that they would be there ready to, pull the tank back a little bit, fix it, and let it keep going. And that was, I don't know, I think it's some of the best battle plans because before that, what you would do is you have the tanks come back, that to the rear battle and fix them. and then have to take them back forward. But having the maintenance forward, you're saving a lot of time and you're getting them fixed there. But of course, there's danger, but that's part of war.
Yeah.
That was whoever come up with that idea was a smart person.
So once you kind of get the planning and the logistics of getting over there, what then becomes your role in the exercise or the operation?
Well, of course, we would receive a mission to go and we may have a number of missions going at one time, and so mine was to manage the people and the equipment as to what people and what equipment would go do this particular mission.
So
And
mission, is that like getting the, like, this tank's broke down here, this situation's going on there, or is it a more
well, a little
broad
bit.
of
It was more like
support this area?
yeah, that was more of it sporting an area. Yeah.
Okay. And then it's
It would
just
be
kind of like whatever calls
there'd
come
be
in.
a company of tanks in a big area, and we say, okay, you go support this, this fifth company battalion or whatever, and we'd have a number of different battalions that we would have to support, and so figuring out how to support, and part of that is okay, reading the intelligence. Where do we think the bad guy's going to come from and hit the most? Because we need to put more of our support in that area versus where we don't think they're likely to come from, and reading intelligence and those kind of things.
What was that like for you? Because that's nothing. That's really nothing that you had any real formal. Was there any formal training on that stuff? How was that transition in that position from kind of being just a regular guy in the Air Force and working your job, and then you go through this ROTC program,
And it
but that
starts
was
there. It actually starts right there, looking at managing those kind of things, starts at ROTC. And for the officer, that training goes on from day one.
okay. So did you feel prepped for that then?
Never totally, and it's a lot of responsibility, but that's why you have exercises is to gain confidence. Because, when I got to be a battalion commander 25 years later, I felt pretty confident I could handle that.
Okay, and so we talked about the ROTC program. You said it kind of started there with the leadership training, but it never. What when you did your nuclear arm, the nuclear chemical biological your training, was there anything going on then that had to do with that? And what was that? What is that training like? I know what leadership training is like from the industry level, right? And maybe even from like an academic level. What is leadership training like from a military perspective?
Well, even at that very, like I said, ROTC training, you're getting some of that. You're put in leadership positions and role play, and sometimes in the Army there's different staff positions. Commander is the ultimate guy that makes the decision, but he also has these staff guys. If he's smart, he's going to listen to and let them do their job. And you got a personnel guy. He knows all the different expertise, all the what we call MOS, their jobs, and how many jobs we of this particular person that we need to do this job, and he's helping fill up the personnel role. The logistics guy, he keeps up with, okay, we need all this kind of supply. We need 5,000 nuts and bolts or whatever it is that they got to. His job is to keep up with that stuff. You got the other support. How are we going to feed our guys? How are we going to protect? How are we going to clothe them? All that
So
stuff's part of it.
that strict organizational hierarchy
Yeah.
is it just kind of like something that is really focused on at the beginning, and it's just kind of ingrained almost, and then you just
Yeah.
trust, you have a real trust in the system? Is that what happens, you
I
think?
think so. I think so. Yeah.
And do you think that it's because it's the established institution of the United States military? I mean, it's a proven institution, I guess, and so you felt comfortable. An individual feels comfortable in that hierarchy once they have a clear understanding of it.
I think so, and again, there's always ways of improving, but to have that structure there to begin with gives you a good place to start and to work out the plan.
And is that something that's also did your boot camp focus any on that? So it's like you do your job because you've been trained to do your job and you trust that the other guy's been trained to do their job. Is that part of it as well?
Yeah, I mean, and because that's at the basic training or boot camp, as you call it, is the individual soldier training individual uh, uh, combat training. Which every soldier has infantry type training, but that's what you're saying is exactly right. Is because you one of the things you're taught is teamwork. I do my function, my partner does his function. I got to depend on him to do it. If I'm defending this area and my partner's defending this area, I got to depend on him doing it. It's kind of like playing football. If I got to block the linebacker, I got to expect the guard to block the tackle. If it doesn't work, and you just got to do that.
Okay. And so how was that coming in as a part timer early on into that maintenance division? What's it like coming in as a part time new leader? Does
It's
everybody in the military?
maintenance company, by the way, but yeah,
Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah. Uh,
You understand what I'm saying? Is it such a high trust environment because of this established institution that people just go with it, or what was that like? How did you feel? What was that like, really?
well, I think you're learning how it operates together, and you're learning to trust. I think in some ways, a National Guard unit may have some advantages over a regular Army unit because a lot of times in a National Guard unit, your hometown guys and they've been working together for years. Whereas in a regular Army unit, they're in and out 6 months a year. They're rotating, going to other places, and there's advantages of that too. But the guy I know that he may be my neighbor down the street. I've been working with him in this guard unit for years. I know him. I know how he functions. I know what he can depend upon. So I always said this. I thought that the particularly the National Guard did a better job at convoying operations than the regular Army did because we practiced it at least twice a year, convoying everything. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, regular Army they go do their job, and very seldom will do that.
I just find some of that stuff interesting as far as like leadership roles and the relationship amongst the individual and the group and in that type of conversation. Um,
Well, yeah, part of that is personality. There's always personality involved, and you hear these stories about these young officers that don't live long. Then you hear ones that do. And I was fortunate to have been enlisted for 4 years before I got commissioned, and so I knew that the guys then even the lower listed guys had been there longer than I had, knew a lot more about some of the stuff than I did, and I had enough sense to listen to them. I didn't go in and think I knew everything. But you get because I was an older guy coming in because I'd had 4 years enlisted. But you get some 18, 19-year-old coming in and knows everything. He's going to have a rougher time than a 22-year-old that's been around.
yeah, yeah. So it sounds like maybe that kind of community atmosphere, knowing that everybody was kind of local to some extent,
Yeah.
and then maybe the way you approach the job as far as understanding the benefit, and it maybe even had a background or had some influence from your family background, like, and seeing the benefits of craftsmen and tradesmen, and where that kind of practical knowledge is and stuff like
Well,
that.
and knowing Dad, Dad,
Right.
Dad would have been a great NCO worker because he knew how to do everything, and I knew I'd better listen to him because he knew more about it than I did, even though I may be the manager.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that? I mean, I think that it seems like that's what makes a good leader, and most folks that are successful are able to listen to the people that are kind of on the front line and have the expertise and make the big picture decision. Do you think that's true in the military spectrum as well?
Yeah, and because I'm biased, because that's kind of how I was raised up. I think exactly right. And having been there, having been that platoon leader down on that front line with those guys, uh, later on in life, it gives you a little more credibility.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty interesting. I want to kind of transition, but I don't want to. I don't want to move too fast. So I think we're kind of going to close our session for today. But I want to start transitioning to some of those earlier civilian jobs that you had right before and into going into law school, and before my older sister gets to be coming on the way, because you talked about the bowling alley, and then I know you worked on the Hartsville nuclear plant, and I want to talk about some of those situations too. But I just don't want to get into too big of a rush as we do it. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. I wanted to go back and talk about that, and I know we're going to return to your military career, because I know you've got a lot of interesting things to tell folks about it, and a lot of insights on leadership and leadership theory, and you talked about a lot of your job was kind of that logistics and supply chain. I mean, that is a huge industry. That is the industry, right?
Yeah.
These days, and so that stuff's fun to talk about. I mean, I've had a lot of experience in that world, from the I guess the civilian aspect of it. So I enjoy talking about that stuff. So I appreciate it.
I think the biggest difference that I see, I think a lot of civilians have actually modeled from the military. The biggest difference is, in my experience, the military did not have to worry so much about budgets.
Yeah, and that's maybe something else to talk about. I know you've got a lot of, and it doesn't necessarily track chronologically, but you've got a lot of experience kind of in the public sector, um, the nonprofit sector, and observed in the private sector. And when you were working with Grant, that's the private sector. So you've got a perspective from kind of all those places that allows for some insights that are interesting. All right, Pops. Well, I appreciate it once again. This has been Maxwell 3000 Productions. I am Maxwell 3000. Peace and love.